Welcome to the Card Text Episode 7, Part 2 of 2, where we continue to go over rules questions for Galaxy's Most Wanted. In this episode, we discuss some more general questions for the expansion, questions about Rocket, Groot, the collector setup, and more. Just some general Galaxy's Most Wanted questions that come up. One that I thought was interesting is Groot's hero ability. The damage priority on Flora Colossus. His first interrupt reads, when Groot would take any amount of damage, remove that many growth counters from him. For each growth counter removed this way, prevent one of that damage. I've listed the timing priority right here. So we believe it's the priority seems like it's defense, your defense basic power first. It handles the damage, and then after that the tough card, after that your growth counters, and after that your hit points.
After that, any other non-forced interrupts, and then your hit points. I think that's relevant because a lot of people miss that energy barrier, for instance, which is not forced, triggers after growth counters.
Yes, for energy barrier to trigger, you would have to be taking damage. So you'd need not enough growth counters to be able to reduce all of it.
Following question, it's a rocket question.
I really like this rocket question. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, this is a great question. So if I have energy barrier and rocket's battery pack in play, what happens if I move a charge counter to the energy barrier tech upgrade? Does that counter remain a charge counter, or does it become a reflection counter? Okay, I
think that's a great question.
Yeah, it's a brilliant question.
I'm gonna take a shot. I'm gonna take a shot here. I'm just gonna say, because the move is legal. I looked through the RRG after this came up, and the move is legal. You could do that, but I don't think it changes what the counter is. I think you still have to remove the energy barrier, because that charge that you put on there is not technically a reflection counter. So if all those reflection counters go and you got that one charge on there, it's still, I think the uses keyword would fire and you would have to discard it.
I mean, I think ultimately you shouldn't do it because charge counters aren't reflection counters. But if you do it, then it just creates this weird case where you have some counters on there. You don't know which counters are which because they're all little green tokens. All the same.
Yeah, if you're not...
If I accidentally spent the reflection counter, I don't know.
Yeah.
I spent a charge counter instead of a reflection counter that time. Can you tell?
Yeah, if you're not using third-party tokens that are different, you don't know. I suspect that they will rule it that yes, it changes when you place it on, because it's both easy and not easy to track. It's one of those things where, yes, you should be able to remember that you moved a token on there and you used this many reflection counters, therefore it goes away. But in the middle of a game, you've got so much going on, and particularly if you're playing a multiplayer game, it's very easy to just not be able to remember. Is that token that he's left, is it a reflection counter or a charge counter? Especially if you've got multiple energy barriers out, you can easily forget where you put the charge counter. And so I think for simplicity's sake, they will rule that it becomes a reflection counter when it's placed on there.
I think I would just, if I were making the rulings, I would say no, unless I knew for sure that, future cards are not going to be, flooded with these counters, because not only can Rocket recycle his battery packs pretty well, there's 2 counters on each, so that's 4 total counters. So if you do get some card that you can put any kind of counter on, and then it counts for those counters, 4 more of whatever that's going to be. I would just steer clear of that unless I knew for sure that that was okay power-wise. So, I mean, there's tons of powerful effects in this game, so it might not be that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, but that's how I would rule it, just because I want to be more cautious. But what Scott said makes sense.
I think in the spirit of cards don't have memory, it should just counters should just be counters. They shouldn't have types that somehow matter when the counter moves around. But they do call them charge counters, and they have named all the counters. Maybe they've decided that is relevant, and they really want to hold to it. I could see the ruling going either way.
Well, we'll move on to the next question here. It's Flora and Fauna question. So if both Rocket and Groot identities are being used, they both have to be in hero form for either to play Flora and Fauna.
That comes down to how important are words inside of parentheses.
Yes. Yeah, I think I fall on a different side of the fence to most people on this, and possibly different side of the fence to both of you. Because when you read the team up keyword description, which was read earlier, but I'll read it again now. So team up. The team up keyword names 2 characters. To include a card with the team up keyword in your deck, your chosen identity must match one of the named characters. Additionally, a card with the team up keyword cannot be played unless both of the named characters, hero or ally, are in play. And the important thing about my interpretation is that the hero or ally bit is in brackets. So it's a parenthetical piece of text. And generally speaking, that kind of text is not meant to be necessary to understand the meaning of the sentence. So if you take that out, then that last sentence just reads, additionally, a card with the team up keyword cannot be played unless both of the named characters are in play. And it's the case with both Rocket and Groot that both their hero and alter ego sides have the same name. Now, the ability itself is hero locked because it's a hero action. Yeah, hero action. And so whoever is playing the card needs to be in hero form. But I don't think the other identity needs to be in hero form. I think it can be in ally form because, say it's Rocket or the player using Rocket that is playing the card. Rocket needs to be in hero form, but Groot could be in ally or alter ego form because his alter ego is Groot.
I think I'm like 60-40 on agreeing with you. I lean towards that interpretation also. I think the hero or ally in parentheses is there to help people recognize that allies are included in that it's not that they don't have to both be heroes, rather than to clarify that it has to be a hero or an ally and not an alter ego. Said I could totally see them saying, nope, that's the rule. Said hero or ally, it has to be a hero or ally. I lean towards the idea that it's primarily that parentheses is primarily there to say, don't forget, it doesn't have to be a hero. It could also be an ally.
Right. Yeah, I would have to disagree with Scott's interpretation. I think the things that follow, if you go with that interpretation, are all of the other team ups are less useful and can't be played as often as these two because they could play them in either form. Doesn't matter what form they're in. Not only that, but I think that reading also means if Gamora had a team-up card with Nebula, you just look at the character. If Nebula, the villain, is in play, then you could play it.
Yeah, but they just don't ever have to print that card, and then it's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say I do think, in defense of it being more useful for Rocket and Groot, Ant-Man and Wasps is more useful because there's more than one Ant-Man and more than one Wasp. that even if you do restrict them all to hero and ally, they're still not all equal in ability to be used because Ant-Man and Wasps can be used more frequently.
I do think the text is just saying, character as in as in the name characters, and then it tells you the 2 card types that qualify: ally type and hero. Technically, it's a subtype, but you know what I mean.
I think it probably should have said identity in brackets instead of hero. And it might be a hangover from, if you remember, the RRG had lots of instances of hero, which they then changed to identity. Yeah, it's possible that the team up keyword description got written at the same time and just didn't get corrected.
Yeah, I could see that happening. All right. Next point. So, do cards with Victory X end up in the collection? I've seen a lot of people make this mistake. Victory X, when a card with the Victory X keyword is defeated, place it in the victory display instead of its owner's discard pile. Victory X, yeah, but the ability on Victory X replaces the discard, right?
Placed in the victory instead of the owner's discard pile.
Right, and the owner being the scenario. Otherwise, it would go to the encounter deck discard pile. So because the keyword replaces it being placed into the discard pile, if that Victory X card was in play and you defeat it, it goes straight into the victory display, not to the collection. Next, so we did have a new mechanic in Galaxy's Most Wanted, Amplify. Amplify icon increases the number of boost icons on a boost card. The boost card is turned face up during an enemy activation. Add 1 additional boost icon to that card for each Amplify icon in play. Does Amplify work with Scarlet Witch's abilities and Wiccan's abilities as well?
They just are abilities that count icons, and in this case, they're not activations, so pretty straightforwardly, no.
Well, it depends. So Wiccan is a clear no, because Wiccan is after Wiccan Thwarts. So yeah, that's not during an activation. But Scarlet Witch, the Chaos Control ability.
Oh yes, that's right. Sorry, I was referring to the Scarlet Witch ally.
Ah, right.
Yes, the hero. It might. It might or it might not. I'm not sure. It's like Wiccan. She just discards the top card, counts those icons, adds it to her ability, I think.
Yeah, so Scarlet Witch is when you use one of Scarlet Witch's basic powers. So yeah, again, it's not an activation at that point. But yes, Scarlet Witch Hero, when boost icons are on an encounter card, would be counted, discard the top card of the encounter deck and count that number of boost icons on that card instead. So if you're doing that to adjust the amount of, say, damage you're taking from a villain attack and you're changing the boost card, then the new card that you're counting the boost icons on, I believe, does still get the +1 boost icon from each amplify icon.
Does it?
I think it should, because Amplify is worded as during an enemy activation.
But it's not a boost card.
But no, it's a boost card is turned face up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a boost card anymore. That's the reason that it wouldn't.
Does that change your thinking there, Scott, or do you still?
I see what you're saying. Maybe.
The during an enemy activation is still okay, but when a boost card is turned face up, not turning a boost card, she's turning a counter deck.
Yeah, Amplify seems to say that it's affecting boost cards specifically, and that card that Chaos Control is discarding, I don't think that's a boost card when she discards it. The effect is not replacing the boosts that you've got and that you're looking at. It's just discarding a top card of encounter deck and then replacing the count.
Yes, I see what you're saying. Yeah, in that case, it does change what I thought. Okay.
Scarlet Witch nullifying side scheme icons.
So, just to recap on that last point or the last question, Scarlet Witch. So Scarlet Witch, the ally, does the amplify work with that? It does not. Chaos Control, it should not work with Chaos Control. Wiccan does not work with Wiccan's ability either. Amplify does not work with Wiccan. Chaos Control or the Scarlet Witch ally. Is there one we're missing? How about her?
It doesn't work with Hexbolt or Molecular Decay, all the Scarlet Witch cards that count icons.
And what about her crest?
Yeah, so you take the amplified number and then the crest modifies that number.
Like if it was a 0 boost card and it got amplified, you could still use the crest to reduce it to 0.
Yeah.
I think that's the one situation where they would interact.
Although crest is an interrupt, so does that happen first?
I assume icons happen first, I assume they're like constant abilities, and constant abilities are supposed to happen before interrupts. Right?
It seems like a constant ability, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. You missed one question.
The spoiler question. Do we want to?
Yeah.
So, yeah, there are spoilers here for like deeper into the GMW. I think most of the stuff we typically cover, we don't care about spoilers. So, the collector, the expert campaign setup, specifically campaign setup itself. So, can you take 3 damage to cheat a card going into the collection from Collector 2's when revealed ability? Then set your hit points to the value in the campaign log. Then spend a unit to heal the max health. This has to do with the way they are telling us to set up campaigns.
Yeah, when I first read this question, my immediate thought was, no, of course you can't do that. That's daft. But then I checked the campaign setup instructions, and it tells you to follow the scenario setup instructions from the core rules, and part of those is resolving any when revealed abilities on the villain's first stage, which if you're playing expert, that's stage 2. Yeah, and stage 2 of the collector has that ability to make you discard, or not discard, put top card of each player's deck face up into the collection or take 3 damage. So that all happens before you actually get to the campaign scenario setup instructions. So I think, yeah, rules as written, yes, you can do it. Whether that's the intended interpretation or not, I'm not sure. I suspect it isn't, and it's one of those things that they just didn't think of.
It very much mirrors the setup cards from Rise of Red Skull, where they had you set your hit points and then adjust them based on this setup card, in spite of the fact that you were supposed to put that setup card into play before you adjusted your hit points for the scenario. Rules as written, that's how it worked. But then when they answered it, they were like, no, that doesn't make sense. You have to adjust hit points after setting them. I think this would be the same. Rules as written, yeah, you adjust your hit points. That's like one of the last things you do. But I'm sure they would be like, no, adjust your hit points first. It would be challenging, I think, to actually write the rules in a way that works the way that I believe they want it to work. Maybe just in the campaign mode rules, say to play a scenario in campaign mode, set up the scenario as per the normal rules of the game, except when setting your hit points, follow this set of rules. They need to pull it out of each scenario. It's not really a scenario specific rule. It's always the same. Set your hit points to what's in the log. And then in Rise of Red Skull, take an obligation to heal, or in here, spend a unit to heal. It's not like this is a massively changing set of rules from scenario to scenario. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's ways around it. It's just the way they've chosen to lay it out would be difficult to just intersect them that way. They want to have their scenario specific rules all together. They want to have the expert rules all together, and that includes this hit point setting thing. That's I think that hamstrings them in terms of what they want the visual layout to look like. I do think it would be a little bit awkward if they put it in the campaign mode rules, because that's probably something that most people don't read. I bet you most people skim that. The campaign mode rules, these like 4 paragraphs on page 4. I would bet most people don't read that. I bet they flip over the page and then flip to the actual scenario rules. So if they didn't have the hit point setting there, people would be like, I don't know when I'm supposed to do this.
A similar thing came up with Rise of Red Skull when people were playing expert campaigns. There's common, and it's come up with Galaxy's Most Wanted again, is do you put the expert cards in? Because when you look at just the scenario setup instructions, nowhere does it tell you to put the expert cards in. But yeah, you have to go back to that initial campaign mode rules bit where it says set up the scenario as per normal rules of the game, and that's where, if you're playing expert, it tells you to put the expert cards in.
There was actually somebody in the Discord got a comment. I don't know exactly how this comment came about from Boggs, which said that he didn't think they needed to be together. You can do whichever. You can do it. Standard with expert campaign, expert with standard campaign. It's all fine.
Oh, right. The other permutation of difficulties. Is that the one you're talking about?
That you don't have to use expert scenarios with the expert campaign.
Yeah.
I don't know how he got that ruling from Boggs. I don't know where it came from exactly. But
they were golfing together apparently.
I thought that was just somebody joking.
It is a joke.
I assumed it was a joke. I thought somebody was just like, yeah, they go golfing together.
It's entirely possible. We have had other rulings that have come through people just messaging one of the designers. So yeah, because they just happen to be friends.
Did we want to talk about Nebula? The Nebula Box Ruling. Do we want to talk about the Boggs?
Yeah, going back to Boggs' reply on the Nebula minion and basically how it's supposed to resolve from this third state of play, not in play, not out of play. What do we want to say about that? Because to me, it seems kind of controversial, but...
To start with, we should just... Nebula's interrupt. Nebula has a forced interrupt. When this minion would enter play, discard the Nebula ally from play. And that has an interesting interaction because Nebula cannot enter play while Nebula is in play, because this unique card can't have more than one copy of a unique card in play. That encounter card can't enter play before the ally has left play, because otherwise there would be two copies of the same card, which is, according to the rules, not allowed. That results in an interesting situation because it brings up the question of how do you resolve Nebula minion's interrupt before she's entered play, because she's not yet entered play. And generally speaking, you can only resolve card effects on cards that are in play. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Scott?
Not really.
I feel like Scott's holding back.
I'm thinking.
So I'll say I think the question is, in the rules, we're told that you cannot interact with cards that are out of play, or you can't trigger abilities on cards that are out of play unless they explicitly say you can. And so I think a lot of the question is, when this minion would enter play is the triggering condition. Does that mean you can explicitly trigger it from its out of play state? Is that an explicit reference to being out of play? For contrast, Lockjaw. Lockjaw is a great example of that rule actually working correctly. Lockjaw says you may play this ally from your discard pile. Explicitly references an out of play state. Discard pile. Very clear. No question. You can use it.
Yeah, that to me would make sense. I think Boggs in his answer, which is a pretty long answer, he referenced a few things in the RRG, and one of them was the golden rule. And I was struggling to kind of I know the golden rule from Arkham, so I was struggling a little bit to understand how this is actually a legitimate application of the golden rule.
I mean, I feel like it's either not golden rule because the rules say if it's explicit, then you can do it, or it's just weird, a weird application of it.
Yeah, it feels kind of forced, because I think one of the things that had been brought up way back when we got one of another unique card that was a minion, it was also a villain. It was Taskmaster, right? So, I mean, we have a rule that says, hey, just don't bring the Taskmaster in if he's the villain. But if you go by the golden rule, you do it anyway. So, like, I don't know if that's similar, but it's one of the things that kind of I go back to when thinking about this.
It doesn't even require the golden rule because uniqueness doesn't apply to minions. The rules because they haven't ever added that section yet.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the rules don't say anything about encounter cards. Encounter cards can do whatever they want. It's only player cards that can't enter play. We have been told that such a rule is going to exist in the new RRG, the encounter card uniqueness rule, because I think it's if a encounter card would attempt to enter play and it cannot due to uniqueness, then it surges.
Yes, that's correct. Scott, give us the feeling that you get from this ruling. Just put it into one word if you can.
It feels convoluted.
I would much prefer if Box had just said, this is an explicit reference to out of play state, and then we could just live with it. Like, it's not. It would be okay if triggering conditions could be considered explicit references to out of play states. That's fine. That would be a fine way to handle these situations.
So that wouldn't ruin like other cards that kind of. Well, couldn't you just apply that to like any card in some way?
Well, it would have to be an interrupt or a response because it has to have a triggering condition. Right? And then that triggering condition would have to be a reference to entering play or leaving play. I feel like they could write a card that had a response after this card leaves play, do blah. I would be okay with that. It's clearly supposed to work that way. It's clearly supposed to work after the card leaves play. That can override this whole rule about, you can only interact with cards that are in play because it's explicit reference. It's not a reference to an out of play position. It's a reference to an out of play timing, but it's okay because it's an explicit reference to an out of play timing. It's the same with Nebula. Nebula is an explicit reference to an out of play timing. It's when she would enter play. It's just before she's entered play. It's the only time the interrupt can even trigger, right? Is just before she enters play. It's not like there's some other timing where you could fire off this interrupt.
Right. Yeah. I think my problem with that is that if you do that, then you kind of open up this can of worms where everybody's starting to interpret cards in this way, even if it's not explicit. Like, oh, it's kind of implicit, so it should work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a can of worms. It's one that technically exists already, though. And, it's this kind of thing that Lockjaw doesn't have a problem for a reason. Nobody starts thinking, oh, I can clear everything from my discard pile just because Lockjaw can. I feel like you could word it in such a way that I don't even feel like this Nebula minion is really that bad in that way, right? It's pretty clear how she's supposed to work.
I mean, I think it would have been fine if it was just constant text. It just said, kick the minion or whatever the other game element is out. I don't think it necessarily had to be an interrupt.
Yeah, I think it being an interrupt complicates matters, and that raises the question of how it works. And if it had been just constant text, we probably wouldn't be asking the question.
All right, listeners, we hope that was informative. If you have any thoughts about the issues we covered or have an idea for a future episode, please let us know here or on Twitter at @thecardtext or email us thecardtextpodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe or follow us for our next episode regarding the new defense rules of RRG 1.4 coming very soon. As always, when you'd rather not read the rules reference, listen to the card text instead.